Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Aquarian Radio. I'm your host, Janet Carol Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and we're getting everybody on today, and hopefully here comes Dr. Lesson.
Hello.
Aloha, Dr. Lesson, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And aloha, Brenda. Hi. This is Aquarian Radio.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So let me introduce you real quick here. This is Brenda Dunne, and our show is about the consciousness and the source of reality. And Brenda was a laboratory manager of the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, PEAR, laboratory from its inception in 1979 until its closing in 2007. And she serves as the president and treasurer of ICRL. She's going to tell us all about these organizations. She holds a master's degree in developmental psychology from the University of Chicago, but her deeper interests are in the humanities, the history and philosophy of religion, and cross-disciplinary approaches to the study of consciousness that incorporate metaphysical as well as scientific traditions. And she has a book that she's co-authored with Robert Jahn. It's called The March of Reality, The Role of Consciousness in the Physical World. And she also served as an education officer of the Society for Scientific Exploration. Welcome to our show. I'm going to do a quick sound check. Dr. Lesson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. And I have problems with my sound. I'm going to take this off of headphone and go on speaker. 1 second here.
Yeah, Professor Jahn and
I'm just, there's something that's been plaguing me that you may be the person that can really help me understand this. In the two-slit experiment, where obviously your expectations lead to the assemblage of what you perceive, they also set up cameras in front of the slits, and it showed that they changed the past because the space in front of the windows changed too. And so that means it's all one thing. And I got so confused, and I think you're the person to help me understand that.
No, I'm afraid I'm just as confused as you are. We did do a version of the double slit experiment in our lab, but I am not an optical physicist, and I don't fully understand, the science behind it. Basically, people were attempting to get the photon to go through one slit or the other and make a bar go up or down in our experiment. But I can't tell you too much about the actual physics of the process.
But it sounds like your theory ultimately, in a way, of the relationship of consciousness and its objects,
Well, yes. I mean, the experiments we did were able to demonstrate that consciousness or human intention could affect the output of random physical systems in accordance with their pre-stated intentions. And we had a number of experiments that explored that. From a microelectronic random event generator to a macroscopic big pinball machine or random mechanical cascade, and several other experiments as well. But basically, all of the experiments we did were addressing the same question: could human intention affect the output of a random physical system? Does that help?
Oh, it helps. That helps them immensely because, well, the question, I guess my question, is it going two ways instead of, is human intention affecting the environment, but is the environment simultaneously affecting, I would say it is, the human and the human's intention? In other words, it's an interactive, simultaneous loop.
Sure, that would make sense. If it's an interaction, it's a two-way interaction. But the experiments the experiments we did really only asked the one question. We didn't ever directly study, how the environment was affecting the human.
Oh, thank you
so I want
so
to take
much.
a couple steps back. Let me interject here. First of all, I want to welcome Brenda to the show. And can you tell us about your organization, your past one, and your current one, and a little bit more about what your projects were about and your concept and what you hope to accomplish and things like that. So let's welcome Brenda.
Thank you.
Take it away.
I think I just pretty much summarized what our PEAR program was about. It was an engineering program that had been established by Professor Robert Jahn, who was then the dean of Princeton School of Engineering and Applied Science. And he became interested in this topic through the supervision of a student independent project. His main area of research was actually aerospace engineering. So he was a rocket scientist, so to speak. But this student project had produced some very interesting results that he felt had important implications for engineering systems and processes. And so he decided to set up a more systematic program to ask that question directly and under controlled conditions. And that was the PEAR lab, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research program. And as you mentioned, this program was established in 1979. And I came in that year when we first started from Chicago, where I had been doing my graduate work in developmental psychology at the University of Chicago, although I had also, in my spare time, so to speak, been doing some experiments in remote viewing, particularly in precognitive remote viewing. This is an experiment where people would attempt to describe a geographical location where another person was going to be situated at an assigned time. We met at a parapsychological association convention where I was giving a presentation about my remote viewing work, and he was there just getting to know some of the people involved, because he was looking for someone who might be available and qualified to supervise or to manage the day-to-day operations of his newly established program. And we found that we had very similar ideas about the topic, and we just connected immediately as soon as we met. And he asked me if I would like to come to Princeton to work with him, and I said, of course. And so I joined him in June of 1979, and that was officially when the program was set up. The program really had three parts to it. One of them was what I described just a few minutes ago, experiments to see whether human intention can affect the output of random physical systems. And we had a number of different devices, from a microscopic electronic device to a macroscopic physical device, and several others as well. The second part of the program continued on the study of remote viewing. And in particular, we were interested in trying to develop analytical techniques that would enable us to quantify the amount of information that was actually acquired in that process. And the third part of the program, which derived from the other two, was trying to come up with some kind of explanatory model that could accommodate the anomalies that we were observing in the experiments. So anyway, we carried this program out for 28 years. we accumulated huge databases, and we were able to demonstrate statistically significant effects, correlations between the behavior of these physical devices and the pre-recorded intention of the human operators. And we developed a number of algorithms by which we could attempt to quantify the information in remote viewing experiments. In both areas of study, we found very highly significant correlations that indicated that there was indeed something happening. Now,
does it vary by who the viewer was? Were there a vast differences in who was making the intention, or did it not matter?
It didn't seem to matter. We did not look for people who had unusual abilities. We were more interested in, the ordinary, person who might be interacting with engineering systems. So all of the people in our experiments were volunteers. They were all anonymous. They were also anomalous. We didn't identify any of them, and we did not study the people. The subject of our studies was really the behavior of the machines. So people came as volunteers because they found the topic interesting, and they wanted to just see what was going on. And we encouraged them to come back and generate as much data as they were willing to, because we felt that well, let me go back. The effects that we observed were all very small. None of them were by themselves anything, to write home about. But they were repeated over and over again, and these small effects compounded in a statistical way to significant deviations from what you'd expect by chance.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
give me an example of what kind of
yes.
Wait, one at a time. Let me give me an example of what kind of effects you were observing. Like just give me one example of what you were expecting and what happened.
Okay, in the random event generator experiments, a microelectronic device would generate trials, binary trials, ones and zeros, and the trials would consist of 200 of these bits, okay? By chance, you would expect 100 heads and 100 tails in 200 flips, right? Mm-hmm. But you might get 102 or you might get 97, and that would not be terribly impressive, just happening once. But if these tiny deviations compounded over many thousands of trials, then the likelihood of this deviation occurring by just pure chance becomes less and less possible. And that's what we saw.
Do you know, Brenda, what it sounds like, it's if you expect to get blood clots from your Johnson & Johnson, a certain amount of you will get it.
Well, that is possible. I can't, comment on that. And I don't know whether those blood clots really, were associated or caused by the vaccine. We just know that, once again, there's a difference between a correlation and a causation.
Yeah.
And in our experiments, we saw correlations, but because these correlations happen much more frequently than these blood clots did, we were able to conclude that there was something going on that couldn't be accounted for by pure random chance.
Mm-hmm.
So another experiment, a random mechanical cascade, was a huge 8-foot by 10-foot pinball machine where 9,000 little marbles, 3/4-inch marbles, fell down through a maze of pins. And they would they would bounce around. It was really quite a wonderful device. And the balls would bounce around, and they would end up in an array of collecting bins at the bottom of the device. And over the 9,000 balls, you would typically see the distribution in the collecting bins that would look very much like your standard bell-shaped curve or a Gaussian distribution. And people in that case would sit about 6 or 8 feet away from the device on a comfortable sofa, and they would attempt to try to get more balls to go to the right or to the left. All of the experiments had this, we called it a tripolar protocol. That is, experiments were carried out with under three intentions. One would be, in the case of the mechanical cascade, to get more balls to the right and then more balls to the left, and a third run that you wouldn't be trying to do anything. With the random event generator, you would try to get more numbers above 100 or more numbers below 100. And, of course, these intentions were recorded ahead of time, and they were all recorded online, in a computer file. So that was basically, the short form of these experiments. We looked at a number of different variables, such as the distance of the person from the machine, and we found that it really didn't matter. People could be sitting in front of the machine, they could be down the hall, or they could be several thousand miles away, and the effects were very much the same.
Wow. Thousands
Yes.
of miles away.
Yes, we had experiments, and the same thing occurred with the remote viewing. It didn't matter how far away the percipient was from the agent who was visiting the location, up to thousands of miles and even several days ahead or after the time of the visit. So the effects we were seeing were independent of distance or time. It didn't seem to matter. What mattered was the intention that the person had and the feeling, the emotional connection or resonance, if you will, that they felt with the process that they were involved in. And
so how do you generalize this to the way the universe works?
Well, there's a lot of stuff in the universe that is random by nature, isn't there? And it means, if we are correct, it means that people's intentions and emotions can have an effect on the way these random processes come out. But again, only on a very tiny scale. You could never point to one trial and say this was the magical one. It was only that. Let me give you an example. Let's say you were flipping a coin. If you flipped it 10 times, you'd expect to see 5 heads and 5 tails, right? Mm-hmm. And now, suppose you got 6 heads and 4 tails. You wouldn't really find that particularly interesting because, of course, that could happen, right? But now if you flip that coin 1,000 times and you got 600 heads and 400 tails, you've seen a very small effect that is compounded over many, many efforts, and that is what makes it statistically unlikely. So what does that mean? Can we affect the universe around us? To a very tiny degree.
Yeah, can we do a rain dance? Can we make the storm go away?
Well, I was once out in the Southwest, and I had an opportunity to witness a storm that came up over one of the mesas in Arizona where a group of natives were doing a rain dance. It was really quite striking. I don't know how they did it, but yes, we do. We are connected with nature. We're part of nature. We're not separate from it. And so, whatever, as you pointed out before, the environment affects us and we affect the environment. And because we're rather small creatures and our effects aren't very strong as individuals, but collectively they can be quite significant. And, if there's enough people doing that rain dance, then something is going on, and they're able to have an effect.
That's so right on. It's like during the non-war when everybody was praying for peace so hard. Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, prayer and meditation are effective.
That they've been shown to be. There have been a number of studies looking at prayer and and healing, and it does seem to have an effect. But again, I have to emphasize that the effects that we saw were small. They were only impressive because there were so many of them. And that was what our program did. We emphasized generating lots and lots of data. We had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of trials in each of these experiments. And so when we did see some kind of a mean shift, we could conclude that it was correlated with the intention.
And what you've shown is that the magnitude of the coherent field can be you can make it bigger and bigger by having more consciousness on it. That's profound. Yeah,
it does. It says that collectively, the collective consciousness can have a powerful effect, even though an individual consciousness can only have a very small effect.
Wow.
That's what we said.
Role of consciousness. What is the role of consciousness in the physical world? Your book.
Well, it seems that consciousness might be. It's not. Well, a lot of people who are studying consciousness are assuming that it's something that the brain produces, but the long distance effects that we saw indicated that it had nothing to do with the physical brain. The consciousness was somehow independent of the physical brain. It is a principle. It's a process. It's not a thing. And in some respects, one might consider consciousness as an ordering principle, something that has the capability of reducing the entropy of random processes to a small degree. We're part of it. We're connected. We're connected with each other, and we're connected with the universe. It shouldn't be too surprising.
Right. So is there, in your, how am I going to say this? Is there a way for us to actually focus on authentic world peace and create it? It's not just woo-woo.
Oh, yeah.
About that?
I think it is. There have been some experiments where groups of people, large groups of people, were concentrating or meditating on peace, and they found that in those areas where they were attending to, there was a reduction in crime and other negative processes.
Cincinnati.
I'm sorry.
I heard, it was in Cincinnati. I heard about those meditation experiments. It was wonderful. Reduced all the violence and a whole bunch of other.
So yes, I think we do have the ability to do that, but we have to work together. There's something when we all come together, in a unified consciousness, we can have a much larger effect than we can as individuals. So anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is there a way, and I'm just trying to formulate my thoughts, I'm thinking that if we all got on the same page, so to speak, and we agreed about, how we can create the evolution of consciousness on this planet, so we could move past this path of inevitable destruction, we're killing our environment, this and that. Is there a way that we can shift our thinking and get ourselves all behind it? Based on the role of consciousness, we can affect this physical world and make all the changes that we need in order to, restore it back to its original beauty before we started polluting everything. Theoretically, right?
Yeah, well, that would be ideal, but you have to keep in mind that there are probably other consciousnesses out there that are trying to disrupt it. So you have a random process.
Unless they form a...
Yeah, like remember there's that experiment where the clocks were ticking, they changed one and they changed the whole thing. It's like, is there a critical mass, a certain percentage that if we get us all on the same page, we could actually affect the entire continuum and bring us back from the brink of destruction into the, a utopian age of enlightenment and, like the Aquarian age. Theoretically, I'm putting it out to both of you.
An effect devoutly to be wished for, but on the other hand, I can't tell you how we can get everybody on the planet on the same page.
Well, one thing to think about, or that I think about, is that the fact that we're not on the same page, that we have challenges of understanding each other and being able to see how the opposed views form a system is the way we actually can transcend it and see the larger system in which it's unfolded, and somehow that's what gives us the ability to take the energies that seem to be disruptive and say this is a perturbation that can help the entire system evolve into a more effective functioning.
That would be a wonderful goal, and I certainly would be in favor of it, but I can't tell you how to do it.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know what to do about the Congress and the people that block everything. It's the same problem.
No, well, human beings are strange creatures. We don't all think alike. We don't, and that is natural. But we did do some experiments where we took a portable random event generator into environments where everybody was on the same page or on the same wavelength, so to speak. Events, maybe a concert, or maybe it would be a meditation group or a religious service. And we found that in those environments, the random event generators did produce deviations from their chance behavior. When we took the device into more mundane environments, a lecture or a business meeting, nothing happened. I mean, it just produced random output. So, yeah, there is evidence that, groups of people who are all in tune with one another can affect the random processes in the environment.
Right.
Terrific. This is terrific.
That's kind of like the thing where, Reagan said, well, what if there was an alien presence and we all got unified behind defeating a common enemy, right? So that would be something that would inspire the group to collect around one thought. And if they were to have one common goal, then maybe they could achieve, based on what your concepts are, they could actually achieve their, what they would like to manifest and co-create.
Well, of course, that would be assuming that everybody thought that these aliens were a common enemy. They might not be an enemy. There might be some people who thought they were friendly.
And that's, of course, what happen. If that happens, some people will say, hey, come beam us up. We want to go on board ship. And so other people say, blow them out of the air. So I can't even think of an example, but I know that was kind of what Reagan was trying to do, I think, by saying that is, well, imagine if we had a common enemy, wouldn't we unify and co-create something that would be greater than the sum total of all of us, right?
But in point of fact, we do have a common enemies. We have pandemics. We have an environment that humanity does indeed have a common enemy, from my perspective.
We do indeed, and they is us, as Pogo would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well,
so there are people who have investments and a desire for this disruption because it's to their personal advantage. So again, this business of all of us being on one page is a beautiful dream, but in all practicality, humans being what they are, it's not very likely that we're all going to get together. But if we can get a majority of people all with the same intention, that could make a difference. It wouldn't change it completely, but it could tilt odds in one direction. That's really all.
Princeton could really do a lot by addressing the wealth that they accumulated in the slave trade, and do something for that would balance that out. You know what I mean? We could do that wherever our particular community is.
Well, I think the community that constitutes the Princeton administration probably has different goals in mind.
I'm sure. So does this mean that we're doomed as a species because we keep having these challenges that grow exponentially every generation? We had, World War I, World War II, and now we've got a pandemic, and we don't ever seem to get it that we need to, achieve unity consciousness.
Yeah.
And we keep doing the divide, separate, hierarchy, one-upmanship, and all that stuff. I think we're doomed. If you just take the conclusion.
I don't know that we're doomed. That's a sort of pessimistic view. I think the ancient Chinese had this concept of the Tao, which was the interaction of yin and yang, the forces of integration and the forces of division, if you will, the forces of entropy and the forces of syntropy. One force draws together and brings things together into a single purpose, and the other one goes to disorganize the system, and making it more random. And it is really that they say that's the nature of reality, and I like that concept. I think we do have this constant dance of yin and yang, of creation and destruction, that goes on all the time. And Teilhard de Chardin, the theologian and philosopher, spoke of the human species as sort of evolving toward a more coherent, a more unified consciousness as it matured, at which point the world would become more organized and more positive. And I think this happens. One way to think of it is there is what we referred to in our work as the source. This William James referred to it as the aboriginal sensible muchness, this huge sea of potentiality that isn't manifest, it's just potential. But then there is this other process, this organizing principle that we could call consciousness, that goes into this aboriginal sensible muchness and extracts from it those aspects that can create a new order. It's the same thing as that yin and yang dance that goes on all the time. I like that vision. I don't like to think that we're totally doomed as a species or as a planet, but I do think we need some growing up to do.
I hope we're not doomed. I just would like us to, wake up before we go off the cliff. So you're presenting at the virtual Contact in the Desert. Dr. Les and I started going to Contact in the Desert back when they started, and I don't know which one this is. Is this the 10th, 11th, 12th? I should bring up the website. But you're doing a virtual presentation. Could you tell us about what you're going to be discussing and when that's going to be?
Well, I don't recall the exact date. It's in June sometime, June 20-something. But what I'll be discussing is basically, the work that I just was telling you about, the work we did at PEAR, the implications of that work for the, if you will, the evolution of human consciousness, and not just human consciousness. I mean, everything living has a consciousness. Trees have a consciousness. Animals,
the planet.
Nature has a consciousness. The earth, I believe, is a living thing. And, what we would like to think is that the work that we did gave a little bit of a glimpse of how we might possibly reduce the entropy in these systems and become a more coherent and a more loving whole. You had asked about, what we did afterwards, our most recent organization, ICRL. That's International Consciousness Research Laboratories. Back in the mid-90s, late 90s actually, I think it was around 97, we got together with a group of our colleagues who came from many different disciplines and backgrounds, but who all had an interest in the nature and study of consciousness. And we would get together once or twice a year and share the work that we were doing and, talk about how the work in one field might possibly have a meaning in another field. And when we closed the laboratory in 2007, we institutionalized, if you will, ICRL. It became a nonprofit organization in the state of New Jersey. And basically it continues the work. We're not doing much in the way of research anymore, but we are playing a role of mentors, helping other people or advising other people who are interested in carrying out experiments such as the ones we did or breaking into new areas. But the purpose of ICRL really is to explore how we can integrate science and spirituality and the role that consciousness plays in that process of integration. One of the things we do is that we have a publishing imprint that we call the ICRL Press, and we have published now, I think it's 18 books that address this dynamic, if you will, from different points of view. And I really enjoy that. I must say, personally, I prefer the the publishing to the statistics. I never was terribly good with the numbers end of it, but we have a group of people, probably. Oh, I don't know. I think the last time I looked, there were maybe 65 or 70 people involved, many of them being people who were professional colleagues or even students who had participated in the PEAR experiments. And it's a beautiful community that has a shared vision and a shared interest in exploring what consciousness is, how it works, what it does. At PEAR, what we could do is we could show statistical evidence that consciousness is, or intention, let's put it, is correlated with certain types of measurable effects. But statistics can only tell us whether or not something probably happened. It's a probabilistic system. And all it can do is deal in probabilities. It can't tell you what happened. It can't tell you how it happened. It can't tell you why it happened. It only can tell you that it probably did. And having gotten to the point where we felt we had enough data to produce a probabilistic result, we wanted to go beyond that and start exploring other aspects of it to see what more we could learn. There is, I think I mentioned a little while ago, there are a lot of people now who are interested in consciousness, which is wonderful, because when we started back in 1979, that was actually a dirty word in the scientific circles. The problem is that although people are now looking at consciousness and wanting to understand it, most of the work that's done in that area is derives from a very materialistic, reductionistic paradigm. if that makes any sense. Namely,
yes, by reducing to its sub-elements, you destroy the wholeness of the understanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just that people are convinced that we will find consciousness when we understand how the brain works. But consciousness is not something that's in the brain. It isn't something that the brain produces. Consciousness is a cosmic principle. It's an organizing principle that we tap into. Our brains serve more like transducers, like a radio. I'm sitting here in my living room, and all around me are all kinds of electromagnetic waves and signals, but I'm not picking up on them. But if I turn my radio on and I can tune it properly, I can probably pick up a particular station. And I think our brains do that. Our brains are tuners that allow us to tune into this source and acquire information, which we then are impelled to describe. And one of the problems is that we forget that the description is not the event. Humans and human brains are very good at describing, at reducing information to something that can be explained and transmitted to somebody else. But that's not where the action is.
Is there any way that people can learn to become more conscious?
Well, there have been schools that have been promoting, meditation and mindfulness. And I mean, basically, if we could just learn to shut up, to turn off that internal noise that's always chattering away in our minds and listen, I think we could become more aware of the subtle signals that surround us. We could become more aware of the subtle signals that other creatures and other entities in the environment are communicating. They're not using English. They're speaking in their own way, and we have to turn off our insistence that our way of thinking is the only proper way. And listen. So if we can be quiet and listen, I think that's the technique. That's what all of the great, spiritual teachers have promoted, throughout the millennia.
Right. So is the internet hurting our efforts to becoming more conscious or accelerating it?
Well, I think it's probably a little of both, don't you think? In some ways, it certainly is facilitating communication, but in the other way, it's also generating an awful lot of noise. And it's a distraction. I think we become so dependent upon the technology that we lose the ability to function as full human beings, or let me say, as full living creatures.
Right. Wow.
But
okay, we have about 16 minutes. What would you like to cover in the time we have left? What would you like to tell our listeners?
Well,
yourself, about you.
Oh, what can I say? My colleague and dear friend Bob Jahn passed away about 3 years ago, and it's been a great loss. We had worked together as a wonderful complementary pair. Bob was very much the if you like, he was the left brain and I was the right brain, and we shared a mutual respect and admiration for the other's abilities and skills, and I think we were able to accomplish together what neither of us could have done alone. I miss him dearly, although I still feel his presence with me. But I guess I would like to just maybe put in a plug for some of the books that our ICRL Press produces. We have a website that's icrl.org, And on there's a link to the ICRL Press, and where people can look at all of the books that we've published and read, brief summaries of them. They're all available as paperbacks. You can get them online through Amazon or Barnes & Noble and so forth. And they're also available, most of them are also available as ebooks. And they address different facets of the way science and spirit can come together in that same kind of complementary dynamic, the yin and the yang again, if you will, the science and the spirit. I don't think that we want to get rid of science. I think science is great. It's one of the great accomplishments of the human species. But we have come to be more dependent upon it and upon the technology that derived from it. And we forget about the spiritual dimension of which we're also a part. So, I would, my message would be, find the middle ground where they come together. Instead of being opposites, they could be complements. That was one of the great insights of Niels Bohr and the early founders of quantum mechanics, was pointing out that things are not dualistic; they are complementary. They are two ways of looking at the same thing. And when you come to that, then you get back to where you can start communicating with people who have different ideas from yours. And say, okay, let me listen to what you have to say. Maybe I can learn something. Instead of being so insistent that our own way of looking at things is the only right way to do it.
Wow.
So that would be that's my goal and my hope.
I would like to just, I wonder what messages you're getting, either in your meditations or in visitation from Bob. What is he giving? What is he telling you nowadays?
He's telling me that he's glad that I'm dealing with all the nitty-gritty junk that comes up all the time, so he doesn't have to do it. No, I just feel, we work together so closely that, and for such a long time, that his way of thinking or his mind has almost become a part of my own. I can sort of switch and say, how would Bob think? What would Bob say about this? And try to, to look at two different ways of seeing something. I think that's the most important thing. We have one universe. We have one planet. We have many different ways of perceiving it. But if we could come together and realize that all of these perceptions, all of these perspectives are legitimate in their own way, there isn't a right or wrong. There is just an other, if you will. And I think we could get along with each other a lot better that way, don't you?
Oh, I love what you said, and that's wonderful. It's like you've taken the best things he had to offer, and they become this part of your structure itself.
Yes, and I think it went the other way as well. We learned a lot from each other, and we had a sense of accomplishment that whatever when we first wrote Margins of Reality, and by the way, there was another book I should mention. You mentioned Margins, but we wrote a sequel to Margins called Consciousness and the Source of Reality, the PEAR Odyssey. And then we actually co-edited a number of other books that looked at different perspectives on the nature of reality. A couple of anthologies where we had some of our colleagues contributing chapters with different points of view on a particular topic. And I would like to encourage people to look at the ICRL Press and perhaps read some of the books that we've published, because I think some of them are quite profound. There's one in particular that I'm very fond of that was written by a couple from Rome, an Italian couple, who were talking about the principle of syntropy and how there's this complementarity between syntropy and entropy that work together. One breaks things down into smaller and smaller parts, and the other integrates things together and creates larger and larger components. So, anyway, but that's just one of the books. There are a number of books that we've published, and I do enjoy the publishing, and I enjoy, the feedback that we get from people who have read some of these books and say that they feel that, they were very helpful. I'm also finding in the last couple of years, just as we're doing today, I've had quite a few experiences of, being interviewed or giving presentations at meetings to talk about the work that we did. And I've been very gratified by the response that I've received from those. When we were doing this work years ago, sometimes Bob and I would look at each other and say, do you think anybody's going to care? And his response was, it doesn't matter. We're not doing this to persuade anybody else. We're doing it to learn. And we did learn. And now it's just so lovely to know that other people have learned from our learning, and it has influenced them to start asking questions that they might not have thought of. I'm very fond of a particular comment that Franz Kafka made in one of his journals when he described himself as a professional disturber of sleep. I think that's a wonderful title. I'd like to be a professional disturber of sleep. I'd like to encourage people to think in ways that they would not have thought otherwise, to start questioning assumptions that they hold, and realize that those are only one way of looking at things. Anyway, I've probably gone over my 15 minutes. I apologize.
No,
that's totally fine. We're kind of free-flowing.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm on your site. Real quickly, I want to get what was the name of the sequel that I found? Molecular Memories, Being and Biology. I'm looking for the ones. Maybe
consciousness and the source of reality. There was another book that we did called Molecular Memories, which was a lot of fun because a lot of people who knew about our work said, margins of reality and consciousness and the source of reality talk about the PEAR work. And there's a lot of technical stuff and a lot of data and, protocols and all. But people who knew us would say that you really cannot communicate the nature, the real quality of the PEAR work without describing the relationship that you and Bob and I had that was so complementary. And so we wrote this book called Molecular Memories. We spoke of ourselves as a molecule, two atoms that had somehow come together and formed a larger entity, if you will. We used to joke around that he was the particle and I was the wave. But there too, this was another thing that came out of quantum mechanics. The particle and the wave are not opposite. They're just two different points of view, two different perspectives on a single concept. And this is something I think we need to learn. And I think we could all get along much better. We wouldn't have so many wars if we didn't insist that our way is the only right way to do things. So
I agree.
So anyway, it really is. And I think there's a change. I think people, and maybe this pandemic, this plague that we've been suffering through, will have a positive effect in that it's causing a lot of people to think twice about what's important, to spend time with themselves and thinking about, what's real, what do I really need, who am I anyway? I mean, these are the big questions. And if we could stop getting caught up in our technology and our toys and start thinking about who we are and how we relate to the natural world and how we are part of the natural world, I think, well, what can I say? I think that's where we should be heading. And I am hoping that maybe this past year or year and a half that we've been going through has been prompting a lot of people to think again about things that they thought they took for granted.
Mhm. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen to a lot of people because they're really thinking about what's most precious in their lives. So I just want to say, in conclusion, before I go, because Contact in the Desert did want me to promote their event. It is June 25th through 28th. And you go to contactinthedesert.com. And they do not have the schedule up yet, so we don't know when Brenda's going to be presenting, but keep checking back, and you can get your discounted virtual passes. Sasha, do you have a final question for Brenda? And then I'm going to bring on the closing music.
I enjoyed this immensely. Thank you so much. It's interesting in existentialism, we assume that everything that we perceive is consciously or unconsciously our intention designed for our growth. That may or may not be true, but it sure helps.
Absolutely. Listen, in the course of my life, I've lived long enough that I can look back on events that at the time I thought were terrible and realize that they were gifts, Sometimes, what's the line from that song? It only goes to show, what is it? You only, oh, Lord, what is it? You don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
You don't always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
And I think that's true. I can think about events in my life that were dreadful, even traumatic at times, and then I look back, from this perspective of my old age, and I say, I learned something very important from that experience. If I hadn't had that, if I hadn't had to go through that, I would not have learned what I needed to learn. So, yeah.
Right.
The divine perfection of all, but when you're going through, it's like, wow, what a wild roller coaster ride. So, yeah. Well, Brenda, it's been a delight talking to you, and I wish you all well, and I hope you have a wonderful presentation. And please go to ICRL.org. I was checking that out while we're talking. Lots of incredible there. And, buy a couple, entertain yourselves, get out of the computer.
Well, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys. I hope I didn't chew your ears off with the talking too much.
Oh, no. I love it. We don't get to go to seminars, and now we got a private seminar for an hour with you. Thank you so much.
Well, it was my pleasure.
Thank you, Brenda.
Okay, well, good luck to you.
Take care,
both of you.
Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Bye.
Bye-bye.